CardGamesTV1 Podcast. Patience is the spice for your deck, right? Or it's the ultimate spice for your deck. That's what I meant to say. So I always say this: the first 4 damage is the easiest. The next 2 damage after that requires a little bit of effort, and the last 2 is the hardest. But of course, there's a lot of cards. Well, there's a selection of cards you can choose to make that aspect easier. One thing that tends to lead to victory or lead to dealing the last 2 damage, which is why I'm talking about this, about patience. One of the most common ways people lose is by being impatient. Is by doing things sooner than they should, or by not waiting, right? The whole thing of not being patient, not waiting until after their opponent goes off. So, there's cards that makes it easy for you to win the game with very little effort. But like I was saying, the clapback thing, the whole waiting, let your opponent go off, like let them try to win, then survive the turn, then try to go for game. Because even if more likely you're going to win, but let's say you don't, at least you're in a better position, especially if part of your clapback, right, your win con has board wiping capability. So if you play a battle card, for example, that has the ability to clear your opponent's board, while capable of going for game, double striking and whatnot, or dual attack, then there you go, right? You're able to make sure that it'd be harder for them to make a comeback after they already tried to go for game, they failed. You went for game, you either succeed, typically, or if you don't succeed, somehow they're able to survive. At least you cleared the board, so that way, the clapback, it'll be hard for them to make a comeback, right? So, that kind of stuff. That's why, being patient matters. You could try to go for game, but they might survive, and if they survive, then you could end up losing. And that's the thing about being patient. You don't want to be in a hurry to try to go for game when you can't guarantee it. So that's why patience is very important. This is why I'm talking about patience is the ultimate spice you can put into any deck, because regardless of what deck you're playing, whether you're playing a starter deck or an archetype, a deck from a booster set, or you built your own deck, ultimately patience is what determines if you win or lose, right? Because these are three things you typically have to take into account: your opponent's ability to block, negate, or out combo your attack. These are 3 ways to stop you from dealing damage. We have tons of ways of dealing damage, obviously, right? We got double strike, triple strike, right? Quadruple strike. We got dual attackers, triple attackers, right? We got stuff that's strong, right? We got stuff that's 20Ks, right? 30Ks, right? We got a whole bunch of strong attackers, right? And we have burn damage, and we have, other ways of winning, right? You can win through milling your opponent out. I already mentioned burn, but again, patience, right? Especially if you're not doing a lot of hand control, right, to reduce the possibility of your opponent being able to out combo or negate. Because it's easier to get rid of blockers. Typically, you'll probably play something that can clear opponent's board, so you don't have to worry about blockers. But negates, unless you have a counter, which we don't have a lot of, it'll be harder to stop a negate. So negates can happen, especially free negates. This is why we always try to attack when our opponent's tapped out, so that way the likelihood of them playing a negate, like a counterattack, will be limited to the free negates. And hopefully your opponent doesn't have it, right? And then the next step after that is So after you get past blockers, past negates, now you have to deal with your opponent's hand size. So those are the three things you typically have to deal with. There is technically a fourth, which is, some type of effect, like an auto, right, or an active battle ability. They can KO the attacker, for example, or whatever you're attacking with. So that's a fourth possibility. So that way they don't have to block, negate, or even out combo your attack, but they can just flat out get rid of what's attacking, right? So there's a fourth, but that tends to be rare. But it's a possibility, so always keep that in mind. But in general, you typically don't have to worry about blockers because you'll take care of that. But free negates and out comboing your attack are the most common things you're going to have to deal with. So, and you can say, yeah, counterplay. Like you try to play something like a finisher. If it doesn't have deflect, bang, Gossip Trunks, right? Or if it doesn't have barrier, bang, Charismatic Villain Freezer. Or, Yamcha or Videl or something similar to that, right? Granted, there are some other possibilities, but those are not as common as you might think, right? So what's typically common, what's more likely to happen, would be negates and out combo. So these are the two things you have to focus on overcoming. This is why I promote the idea of dual attacks, things that can attack more than once, like leaders, unisons, battle cards, right? So that way you can try to bypass to your opponent's negates, especially if they're using single negates, right? If they're using stuff like blocker negates, floodgate negates, that'd be a little bit harder, because once they make it where it's hard for you to attack a lot in a single turn, even having dual attack or even triple attack is a little irrelevant if you're prevented from doing extra attacks. But this is why you typically want your opponent to be tapped out, because there ain't that many floodgate free negates, blocker negates are pseudo floodgate negates, free negates, but bodyguard, not bodyguard, baby Hatchiak, what's her name, Time Patrol Maiden. Those are two essentially free floodgate negates, right? So since there's essentially just two right now, maybe there's one or two more extras that I didn't think of, but those are the two more likely common ones you'll see that can not only negate but can floodgate, right? Negate. So, but in those rare situations, and they got you, right? But if they don't have that, then you should be able to do multiple attacks. And that's what you want to do, is try to get out as many attacks as possible, because if your opponent has 2 or 1 life, you're just trying to deal 1 to 2 damage per game, right? Because like I said, the last 2 is the hardest, which means you will be at a point where your opponent only has 2 or 1 life. So you just got to find a way to get to that point of getting rid of that life. And there's a couple different ways of trying to achieve that, and just 17 turn type being one of them. Because if your opponent doesn't have cards in the hands, they can't out combo, they can't negate, right? Not even free negates, no floodgate negates, no bodyguard legic, not bodyguard legic, baby Hatchiak, right? You don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. So obviously, and he has the flex, so you don't get. So if they don't have baby Hatchiak in their hand, they can't floodgate negate, right? I meant to say, because Enter 17 turn attacks has deflect, you don't have to worry about guys sitting in trunks. You do, however, have to work. No, wait, I don't think that works either. I don't think they can guys sit in the trunk. I mean, definitely they can't, but I meant to say Charismatic Villain Freezer. Sucks trying to record at work. Then what was I saying? Charismatic Villain Freezer might not work against something that's deflect. That's what I'm trying to say. Right? Or it does. I think it does. Yeah, because it's an auto, right? Anyway, point is, it wouldn't be that big a deal. It wouldn't matter too much, because you can win without Android 17 himself. You just need his effect of getting rid of your opponent's hand. And then, like I said, and then just swing for game. because you're in the perfect storm, right? The perfect moment. So again, it's about patience, right? Making sure that you wait for the right moment to go for game. Sometimes you'll get a little impatient, especially if you're playing competitively. Time is a factor. If your opponent's taking too long on their turn, then it's your turn. Then you're trying to play faster because your opponent, played slower, right? They took too long to play their turn. And you're trying to play your turns as quickly as possible, trying to deal as much damage as possible. Obviously, trying to get them down to 0 so you can win, right? So if that's the thing that happens the most, right, is you relying on being able to attack and try to get through their defenses and stuff like that to even deal damage, and time is against you, that creates a problem. But you still gotta be patient nonetheless. It does suck because when it comes to time, it does seem like a contradiction with patience. Patience means wait a little bit longer, right? Wait a turn, but waiting a turn can literally waste time. And if you waste time, you might not be able to go for game, right? Or you might not be able to win just because you lost by time. So that's the thing that sucks with the whole time rule thing. This is why they really need to implement time for each player's turn, so that way you wouldn't be in a scenario where you run out of time to try to go for game, or be patient and wait for the right turn to go for game, and run out of time before you get a chance to go for game. Because if the best time for you to go for game is turn 6 instead of turn 5, you should be able to be allowed to have the time to go to turn 6, play your turn 6, and go for game, right? There shouldn't be like, oh, time's up. That's an unfortunate thing, but it's something that happens, right? Which is why, for competitive purposes, not casual you can just take your time, but for competitive purposes, you gotta try to find a way to deal the damage as quickly as possible. Try to do 6 within the first 2 turns of the game. That way you're spending the next 3 turns, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, which turn 5 and above is late game, so you're spending mid to late game trying to finish off your opponent, and you're trying to find the right time to do so. And usually you want them to have 6 or less cards in their hands. You want to have more cards than them if you're going to do the whole attack and combo your whole hand off situation. Conserve your super combos for those who use super combos a lot. Obviously these are basic stuff to keep in mind. But again, patience tends to be the most common reason why. Lack of patience. Impatience is why a lot of people tend to lose. Patience is why a lot of people tend to win. Even because there's some scenarios I've seen where somebody will be in a losing position, where like their opponent has the advantage against them, but then their opponent was impatient. Instead of waiting a turn, they try to go off, right? Try to go for game. Their opponent was able to survive, and that made a huge difference, because now on the clapback they were more vulnerable. Remember, they're trying to go for game because they felt that they were in the winning, since they were in a winning position, right? They were in a more favorable position, I should say. They try to take advantage of it, right? So overconfidence is another way of looking at it, right? They were in a advantageous position, so they try to take full advantage of it, but then came up short, and that coming up short, can bite you in the ass. Which is why it's important to, try to take your time, but not too much time, especially if you're playing competitively. Try to take your time to make sure that when you try to go for game, try to finish the game off, you can guarantee that the game is completed when you want it to be completed, and you win. That's why patience is very important, because another thing is about taking your time, for trying to go for game, right? Trying to finish out the game, is literally, is the idea of trying to burn out or play through your opponent's defenses, because they might still have, negates and super combos and stuff like that. So you're going to spend most of your turns trying to bait out the negates, the super combos, right? Things of that nature, and maybe any other problematic card, maybe even a Gassian Trunks or something, right? you're trying to bait out any possible issue you might end up having when you try to go for game. So you want them to use Baby Hatchiack early game. You don't want them to save it for late game for when you're trying to go for game, and then they drop Hatchiack on you. And one of two possibilities happens: either A, time run, the game, they call time and you end up losing because you had less life than your opponent, or you just can't go for game. So then you have to end your turn. Then your opponent gets a chance to try to go for game, and they might succeed, or they might get your life points low enough that when time is called, they win anyway, right? Because again, time, right? So those types of issues can come up. So again, more reason why we need better time management when it comes to these events. Especially, this can definitely be done on online, webcam tournaments. You can have like a counter or something, or a timer or something. I mean, technically in real life, we can have like little on our phones, little timers and stuff to time the turns. That's something I would like to be a normal thing, is to have a timer, right? Have something that that's calculating the time in general for the rounds, right? But also counting like 2 minutes, for example. Every 2 minutes you'll hear a little sound effect that indicates 2 minutes it has passed. That way everybody you can start taking turns, like, 2 minutes is up. You have plenty of time to try to do stuff. It's time for you to end your turn, so I can have my turn, have my 2 minutes, and then just back and forth, so we can have a nice steady pace of making sure that everybody gets enough time, turns and chances to play the game, because that's the most important part, is playing the game, right? Chances to play the game and then finish out the game in a fair fashion, right? Granted, the idea is to always have the unfair advantage, right? Always have the advantage in a game. That's usually one of the ways you win, is because your deck is better than your opponent, or you have your opponent's weaknesses. You have cards that hurt your opponent's deck, or whatever, or you're just better at making decisions than your opponent. Whatever advantages you have, it makes sense. But literal time shouldn't be an advantage, right? The fact that somebody could take too long to do some basic moves, basic stuff. I mean, God forbid they allow sloths into the competitive scene, right? And you literally have animals that just move very slowly. Imagine them trying to play Dragon Ball Super. That'd be bullshit. Clearly, they're slow playing. You know what I mean? And God forbid somebody is injured and they have like a bad shoulder, and like they're trying to move their arms around and trying to shuffle and trying to do stuff, try to look in the graveyard, like that kind of issue. I mean, even somebody being extremely old to the point where they move slow and they're hard of hearing and all these things that doesn't really benefit the game, that really creates a issue. These types of factors need to be taken into account. I'm not saying old people shouldn't be able to play card games. I'm just saying that if they're hard of hearing, hard of seeing, right? They have bad eyesight, and their physical movements are extremely, extremely slow. Competitive card games might not be the thing for them. Just saying. And the same goes for anybody else similar to that. Just like, again, time management needs to be a factor in competitive play, so the games can be fair. Not balanced, but fair. So, patience, right? Patience is a virtue. Patience as a strategy. For example, turn 1, turn 2, you can go aggro, right? You can go balls deep, as they say. You can just go off and not worry too much about clapback, not worry too much about getting turn 2 KO'd or some shit like that, especially depending on what the matchup is. But on average, regardless of what deck you go up against, you typically don't lose on turn 2. You might take, maybe 4 damage at most by turn 2, but you won't lose on turn 2. So after turn 2, turn 3 and above, you might want to keep your defenses up, so keep some energy up. Make sure you can use your negates. If your negates require energy, make sure you have energy for it, right? It's a bit of common sense, but sometimes common sense ain't as common as it used to be. And this is why I'm talking about patience, because some people don't have the common sense to be patient, to wait. Some people are a little impatient. And the thing about being impatient is it's an emotion. It's not logic, it's an emotion. So you're not being logical about going for game on turn 5 when the best time is to go for game for turn 6, because turn 5 there's a high probability you might fall into a baby hat shack or into something similar, or your opponent's hand size is is thick enough that they can survive a turn. So it might not be ideal to try to go for game on turn 5. You might want to wait until turn 6. So impatience is not a instinct of like, oh, this is the best time, let me go for game. No, it's an emotional indicator that you don't want to wait. You're impatient, right? That's why we call it impatient. You just can't wait for the game to end. So now your feelings is overriding your logic. So instead of waiting for the perfect, ideal, no doubt you're going to win moment, you're going to try to make a moment, right? You're going to try to create a situation where like, all right, I'm going to swing for game now. I'm going to go for game. I think I have enough counter power in my hand for game. So you, quote unquote, you think you have enough, but you don't know. You didn't confirm. You didn't do your combo math. You didn't make sure that their hand size was half of your hand size, right? If you have 12 cards in your hands, you definitely want them to have 6 cards in their hands, right? Which is half of your hand, right? Just in case they have super combos and those super combo draw cards, this is why you want them to have half of what you have. You don't want them to have like 2 cards less than you, but they just so happen to have super combos, which adds 2 more, especially if they have 2 super combos, that might add 2 more cards to their hands. And if you don't have super combos, let's say, then that's even more reasons why you gotta be cautious. That's why you want their hand size to be way less than yours. In case you don't have super combos, you definitely want their hand size to be less than yours in case they do. But if you do have super combos, you still want their hand size to be, very, very low in case they do have super combos. Then it's it counteracts your super combos, counteracts their super combos, so it makes their super combos less important because you super combo, they super combo, y'all draw. Even if y'all draw 5K combo and y'all added, right, it's a little irrelevant. It's like, you're just canceling each other out until it gets to the point where, oh, I have 5K more than you, yay! I was able to out combo that attack, that kind of stuff. And as an attacker, you don't have the luxury of being able to determine how much you need to combo, right? Your opponent, as a defender, does have that luxury. They do have the ability to be like, oh, okay, 60K double strike to my leader, no problem. Let me get my leader up to 65K, and I can survive the attack. Right? They have that luxury. As a defender, they're in a positive. They're in an advantageous position. They have the advantage in that situation over you. Especially if they have something like Shagesh Kid, Goku combo, right? Obviously that's not legal at the moment, but if it was, that would be a very bad situation where they just drop that on you and it's like, oh damn it, combo my whole hand for nothing. Yep. Also make sure your finisher is either unison leader, right, to be more safe. But if you're going to use a battle card, make sure at least it has barrier or it's 8 cost and higher, just to avoid a potential, what is it called? Heron's lineage or some type of play like that. So you might want to be careful. What else? About patience. I mean, not much to say about patience other than being patient, right? You want to make sure that you don't make mistakes, right? If you're interested in trying to go for game one turn sooner than you think is the best time to try to go for game, then at least make sure you have the ability to back it up, right? You have the ability to defend yourself. Sometimes some people just, they've foregone their ability to defend themselves because they want to try to go for game. So they end up giving up the ability to keep up their defenses. Because they could have defense, right? They could have like a Senzumin in their hand, which can obviously open up other negates in their hands, right? Other options in their hands, like an Oceanus or something, or Topo. But because they didn't keep one energy up, now they're in a bad situation where now their opponent has free reign to attack them. And most of your hand is it's defensive cards, right? Negates and stuff like that require energy, right? It's like, well, I have less combo power in my hand, I have all these negates, but I can't play them because I'm tapped out, and boom, my opponent got me, right? So that's why it's like very important to be patient, because if you're not patient, or at least cautious, or logical about the decisions you make, you might actually end up giving your opponent the victory, right? You might give your opponent the perfect opportunity to go for game. So your impatience can lead to their victory, which is why it's important to be patient, so that way if they do that mistake, right, if they tap out, like they try to go for game, you survive, but now they're tapped out, and now you have like the perfect storm, I say, the perfect storm, the perfect opportunity to go for game, then you can do so, or at least try to take advantage of the fact that they tapped out and they put themselves in a bad position, but keep your defenses up anyway. So it just, ideally, you don't want to be without defense, right? You always want to keep your guard up, just like in a real fight. You always want to keep your guard up. You want to always make sure you can defend yourself, right? You don't want to swing at your opponent and then not have your guard up, so that way they have free reign on punching you in the face and knocking you out, right? So just like in real life, you wouldn't let your opponent just punch you back after you hit them, right? So easily. Don't let them do that to you when you're playing, in card game, right? Ironically, patience can come in the form of effects of cards, right? Typically, we call it stalling. I tend to try to incorporate floodgate effects, right? Floodgate negate effects like Topo, Oceanus, and any units that has the ability to floodgate my opponent on their turn. Violent rays, things of that nature. Super Saiyan 4 Goku, the Protector of the Earth, Unison. That is an auto that makes it hard for my opponent to attack on their turn with battle cards. So little things like that. Even using cards that makes it hard to attack. Even using leaders that makes it hard for your opponent to attack. Like, Hatchak leader. Having like the Boma leader, and then having a whole bunch of, yellow and red Earthlings or Saiyans that have the ability to go back into active mode after you attack with them, so you could use them to block, right? So you can attack and defend. So like I said, always keep your guard up, defensive stance. So always want to keep your guard up. So that kind of stuff in mind, that will help you patiently, right? That will help you, because that's all you ultimately what you're doing is patiently waiting to get to a kill turn. It doesn't have to be your designated kill turn, because a lot of my decks are designated. The turn 4 is the turn in which I should be able to go for game, or turn 3, depending on the deck strategy. If it's an aggro deck, typically turn 3 and 4 is the kill turns for an aggro deck. But if I'm playing something a little different, like for example, I use Android 17 turn and tides. The earliest I could potentially play Android 17 turn and tide is turn 5. So then turn 5 will essentially be the kill turn. So if I can get my opponent down to 2 life at least, or 3, I'll say 3. If I can get my opponent down to 3 life at least, by turn 5, and then because I was ramping, I can drop 17 for 7 energy, get him out, and then bang, try to go for game when my opponent has 3 life on turn 5. But if I have to wait to turn 6 to do it, or even if I have to wait to turn 7 or 8 to try to enter 17 turn attacks to go for game, then that's what I would do, right? That's the point about being patient, is just waiting for the ideal moment in which you can play your win con, your best strategy. That's why even saving your negates, right? Instead of negating an attack, just take the damage. That will be part of a form of patience, because you want to save that negate for later on. A lot of times that happens where you negate a little too early, and then your opponent like overwhelms and then goes for game. It's like, God damn it! I should have not negated that other attack. I should have taken it, and I would be down to 1 life right now, and then I would still have the negate for this double strike. But instead, I negated that single damage attack. Right now, I'm seeing a double strike coming at me. It's like, damn, I should have saved the negate for the double strike. So that's a little pro tip right there. Is you typically want to try to negate double strikes over single strike damage, especially if you could afford it. If you have 2 life and you can afford to take 1 damage, just take it. Especially if your opponent wants to combo, like, yeah, let them deal you 1 damage and combo half their hand into that. Thank you. What you don't want is a Champa, right? Supreme Kai, getting comboed off. That's an issue. If that happens, that happens, right? They got you. But if they don't got that, and all they got is just 1 damage, they're going to deal you. Take it. And then, hopefully they don't have an overwhelm play, right? But if they have an overwhelm play, at least you have to negate, whether it's a single damage or even a double strike damage. It's just that, sometimes, that can happen where you negate an attack. It's like, oh, this is probably going to be the last attack they're going to swing. You know what? I'll negate it. And then they overwhelm. It's like, damn it. Now I got to deal with that, and that's double strike, and I only got 2 life. So I can't take this. This is something I will have to stop. But I might not have enough cards in my hands to out combo. I don't have a blocker, and I already wasted my negates. So that's the thing. So that's why being patient is important. That's why sometimes you shouldn't out combo an attack, right? Sometimes you should just take the hit, because the cards in your hands could be the reason you win, which is why you should keep them, especially if you need the combo power. When you go for game, you might want to keep the combo power to go for game, as opposed to try to use it defensively. You might want to save it to go offensive and go for game, which is why you need to be, patient, right? Instead of trying to out combo every one of your opponent's attack, try to negate every one of your opponent's attack to hopefully get them to end their turn, so that you can get to your turn. Just be patient, think logically. Make sure that you've thought far enough ahead to be able to make sure that there is no other play that they could make that could cause them to win. You want to make sure that you want to make sure that you can guarantee the turn will end when you want it to, right? As opposed to you thinking that this is their last attack, I got game next turn, and then they like bang overwhelm or sell Zeno, like, oh god damn it, sell Zeno, like some shit like that, right? You don't want some surprise to happen. You want to make sure that you guaranteed that the turn will end with you surviving, and then you get them on the clap back. What else? Oh yeah, sometimes even deciding what card you should play. Sometimes, for example, let's say your opponent has 4 battle cards. Instead of trying to Let's say you have a 5-drop card you could use to get rid of all five of the battle cards, right? Let's say you have a 5-drop board wipe. Let's say you got the Super Saiyan 4 Goku Protector of the Earth Unison, right? Has the nice auto plus has the -2 bounce, ignore barrier, bounce all your opponent's battle cards back to hand, right? You could use that to clear the board, right? But, right, in your own turn 5, right? So you could play that, but then you'll be tapped out unless you're playing Soul Striker. That's a different story, right? But let's say if you play that, you'll be tapped out. Yes, you have the floodgate ability, but at the same time, your opponent probably could just reestablish their board with those cards, or it was just not that deep, right? It wasn't necessary to get rid of all of the battle cards. Maybe there was 1 or 2 battle cards that was problematic. There was a threat, but all the other cards wasn't that big of a deal. So you have another card, whether it be a battle card or use it. Let's say it's the 3-drop Vegeta with dual attack. He has the ability to bottom deck 2 of your opponent's battle cards, right? So instead of trying to get rid of all 4 battle cards, just get rid of the 2 problematic ones, right? So play the Vegeta for 3, get rid of the 2 battle cards, and you still have 2 energy for some negates, and then try to, survive their turn on with the negates. That way you can get to turn 6. Then on turn 6, you drop the Goku Unison, right? Get the floodgate ability on, do the -2 ability, clear your opponent's board, swing, get some damage in, right? That way, on turn 6, you have that, you're good. And since it's turn 6, you still have 1 energy up, which is good for like a negate, Senzu Bean, that kind of stuff, right? Especially if you're playing blue. Obviously, I'm talking about blue, right? So you can do all that. So you're good. Then you can get to turn 7, right? Because you play your you play your Goku on turn 6, so there's a higher chance you might get to turn 7. And then you turn in ties your opponent, or any 7-drop card you want to play, but turn ties is obviously a really good option, especially if you want to go for game. So you play it, and then you proceed to go for game. And that's the importance of being patient. You could play a 5-drop on turn 5, but it'd be better to wait till turn 6 so you can play and still have 1 energy for defense at least. And this is the importance of patience. You might be in a scenario where on turn 2 you want to play something to ramp, like let's say Majin the Fire's West Supreme Kai, which is what I normally play, or if you want to play the 2-drop Zeno Unison, and you try to use that to help you, with ramping and stuff like that. Instead of playing either one of those cards, you can keep the energy up for defense, right? To play like Oceanus or something, or just keep it up, just to maybe play a negate or some 10k combo power, right? That requires an energy, right? So you just want to keep the energy up. Then wait to turn 3, then drop your 2-drop Unison, or 2-drop Majin the Fire, West Supreme Kai, and that way you still have 1 energy up that you can use, defensively. So that way you could put up your ramp card, right? The card you're trying to use to ramp into your win con. More likely that's your goal, is to try to ramp up to a win con, and then still have the negate, especially if you need the negate to help. I mean, the energy to play a negate to help you, get to turn 4, right? Especially if you're playing, something that helps you ramp, getting to turn 4 and then getting that ramp, benefit. So now we have turn 3. Drop on turn 3. So that would turn 4. You have 5 energy. That way you'll be able to have 5 energy on turn 4. And be able to play something, like a 5-drop that might be really important to play on turn 4, right? So that's why instead of dropping your ramp card or whatever card you're going to use as a form of ramping, instead of playing on turn 2, playing on turn 3, right? So that waiting that long, has its value, especially if you're going up against an aggro deck. You might not want to tap out on turn 1 and 2, right? You want to keep those energy up on 1 and 2 against aggro, just in case they, trying to play a whole bunch of free play, trying to swing at you a lot, especially if you're going up against King Piccolo, you might want to keep your energy up on turn 1 and 2. After that, turn 3 and above, then you can start, tapping some energy, but still want to keep at least 1 or 2 energy up after turn 3, so that way you can, be able to make plays, but still be able to defend yourself in the process. So that's the thing. It's very important to know when is the best time to, tap out and not worry about, keeping your defenses up, but also knowing when you should be keeping your defenses up. Because sometimes you might get complacent, might get used to tapping out. So if you're used to playing a 3-drop on turn 3, a 4-drop on turn 4, and so forth and so forth, if you get into the habit of doing that, that can cause, that can create a problem, right? That can cost you a match, right? That can cause you to lose because you're not being patient, right? You're not really being aware of your environment, right? You're not being aware of the game state, right? You're not being aware of the possibility that your opponent might be able to go off on turn 3 or turn 4 or turn 5. So you might want to keep your defenses up because of that possibility. And a good rule of thumb is try not to underestimate your opponent. So give them the benefit of the doubt that they could go off. So that's why you should always try to keep your defenses up, because the possibility your opponent could go off. Right? Unless 100% the exact plays, the exact, combos and cards your opponent is playing and using, and unless you know that what they're going to do before they do it, because you that good, right? You that knowledgeable of your opponent's deck and strategy and train of thought and play lines, unless you're really that knowledgeable, right? Or you just have the ability to read your opponent's mind, right? You might want to keep your defenses up, because you could literally lose just because you tapped out, right? There was a time where some people were like, not a big deal to tap out on turn 2, but then some decks start popping up that, were really aggressive turn 1, turn 2, and they're like, oh, no, we can't be tapping out on turn 2 no more, right? It's like, lesson learned. Because again, it does depend, right? It depends on what deck you're going up against that determines if you should tap out, or not, right? Should you make a play? Should you not make a play? Sometimes something as simple as playing a unison and then using God Save the Trunks, for example, as your line of play, as opposed to doing something else. Just be like, all right, I'll play this unison, swing for some damage, or try to deal some damage. Hopefully I bait out some negates and end my turn. My opponent tries to go off, they're like, oh, I'm gonna play my big battle card to go for game, and you're like, God Save the Trunks, right? Just that, even something as simple as that, just being a little patient, right? Just be like, all right, you know what, I'm going to use this unison and this God Save the Trunks in my hand. Instead of keeping it in my hand, I'm gonna play it, get some use out of it, or try to get some use out of it, and then the next turn, make a different play, right? Play the stuff that I want to play, right? That way you can get some use out of those cards, and there's a high probability that making that decision, making that play, being patient, waiting a turn to make a play, and making that basic line of play of like, oh, unison, God Save the Trunks, making that basic type of play can put you in a winning position. Another thing is like, even like, instead of me tapping out and trying to deal some damage this turn, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep 2 energy up for Topo, right, as an example, and then just end your turn. You're hoping your opponent, tries to extend, try to go for game, like, ooh, good, got him. He tried to go for game, he got a little impatient. He should have paid attention to the fact they have 2 energy. Tap the 2 energy, Topo, right? So now you made your opponent feel impatient. Now, granted, can you take advantage of your opponent, right? Can you play some mind games and tap out on purpose to get them to think that it's the best time to go for game, right? That is something you can do, right? Because like I said, being patient has its benefits. Being impatient tends to have its negative consequences, right? Tends to have bad things tend to happen when you jump the gun, as they say. So you could take advantage of that, right? Of the fact that somebody being impatient, and put your opponent in a position where you like deliberately tap out, even though you got all these free negates in your hand and whatnot. You deliberately tap out, making it seem like you're trying to go for game. It's like, I'm attacking. Yeah, I'm doing this. I'm attacking. Yeah, I'm doing that. And the person's like, I'm stopping your attacks. I'm out combo. Yeah, I'm taking damage. Yeah, I'll take the damage. Yeah, good. And I'm like, all right, that's it. In my turn. And then in their mind, now they're like, yes, he's tapped out. The perfect time to go for game. And I got this big hand size. I'm going for game. And then epic fail, because now you got all these free negates. Sometimes people do that. Like sometimes people tap out on purpose, especially if they're playing blue, when they have baby Hatchak in their hands. You usually can tell if they have baby Hatchak in their hands. They tend to like tap out. They tend to tap out a lot because they so don't expect anyone to stop baby Hatchak. So you can tell if baby Hatchak is in their hand just by the fact that they tap out a lot, especially after turn 3, because they have to have 3 energy or more in order to play baby Hatchak. So as soon as you see them tapping out turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, it's like, they got Hatchak. It's a little too obvious, right? So that's the kind of stuff you learn from, obviously from playing a lot, and you get some experience. I mean, if you're a very observant person, it doesn't take that long to figure out human behavior, figure out how players play certain things. And that's why patience is important, because if you wait long enough, and you pay attention to your opponent, you might see when they look like they're going to go for game. Like they might look like they're getting ready to go for game the following on their next turn. Then you're like, okay, their next turn they're going for game, I better not tap out, because it looks like they're going to go for game, right? So I better not tap out. So things like that, it's important. So it's important to pay attention to your opponent, like how they're behaving, because sometimes they tend to give themselves away. They tend to telegraph their plays, right? They tend to be predictable, is what I'm trying to say. So if you're a good observer, you're good at noticing things, you can notice when your opponent is a little impatient and they might be trying to like finish the game as quickly as possible. So they'll try to use up as much of their resources as possible. They'll try to play as many cards from their hands, trying to finish you off. And if you're, wise, right, and patient, and just wait for the right moments to negate, the right moments to take damage, right, your chance of surviving that turn is higher, and then the clapback will be glorious. And that's the end of the podcast.